Welcome to Why the Work Matters, a podcast by DVIP and RVAP Crisis Services. DVIP and RVAP provides comprehensive support services to persons affected by domestic violence, sexual violence, dating violence, stalking, and human trafficking in 8 counties in Iowa, including Johnson, Iowa, Cedar, Des Moines, Henry, Lee, Van Buren, and Washington counties. In these episodes, we will explore the stories behind the mission, stories of resilience, healing, and the people who make change possible.
I'm Kristie Fortmann-Doser. I'm the Executive Director at the Domestic Violence Intervention Program, Rape Victim Advocacy Program. I've been with the agency since 1993. I was a Rural Outreach Coordinator. I was responsible for services in Washington, Iowa, and Cedar counties. I actually worked with the Cedar Rapids. At that time, it was the YWCA and then became Waypoint. I started out as the volunteer coordinator there, and then I supervised the sexual assault services for 3 counties. I actually started on campus here as a volunteer for the Rape Victim Advocacy Program back in 1986. I was a survivor. I had been sexually assaulted by an acquaintance and had sought support and services and really appreciated and saw the difference in how the individuals who were doing this work and advocating for victim survivors were doing it in such a unique and powerful and empowering way. It spoke to my heart from the very beginning. I was a little bit of a political wonk as a high school student, and I always understood that the political was personal and the personal was political. And so starting to work in the field of ending violence against women was a pretty natural fit for me. I'm retiring in a few months, and I've been thinking about, what does this look like beyond me? And what does this look like beyond where DVIP RVAP is at right now and our field as a whole. And I think that one of the things I've learned over time is that there is a level of communication and a level of community engagement that will always happen. How victims are treated is so embedded in our society that we have to continually educate and fight for victims. And so for me, what I see as the future is that 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, but we keep moving forward. And bluntly, how we talk about sexual violence and domestic violence and human trafficking, how we talk about them is so completely different than how we talked about it when I first started doing this work. And that's something that really holds me up and buoys me. It is something that helps me see that it will continue to change. And accountability continues to change. And as accountability continues to change, then that level of violence and that kind of violence changes as well. My favorite part is the moment when anybody, whether that's somebody I'm talking to in the community, whether that's a survivor I'm talking to on the crisis line, that moment that somebody gets that violence is never your fault and starts to make that shift in their head about who we actually are supposed to be holding accountable and who we are actually supposed to be looking at in terms of if we're going to solve this problem, looking at victims and saying you need to leave or you need to stop acting a particular way or you need to stop going to certain places is such a ridiculous way to look at this crime. The absolute hardest part of the job is how victim survivors are treated. The way that they are blamed for the actions of another person, the way that we as a society ignore the absolute depth and breadth of crimes against marginalized groups. Yeah, that's the part I hate the most. I think for me, the victim blaming has changed the most. It is by no means gone. Let's be very, very clear about that. It still absolutely happens. The first question we still always hear is, why does that person stay? Or why did that person go to that place and drink that drink or wear that outfit? Or why did they go back to that person? Those are all incredibly victim-blaming statements, and they have not changed. What has changed is the willingness to step away from those questions 30 years ago when I started doing this work, I had to be prepared to really battle through that conversation and really challenge people on a personal level to understand the experiences of victim survivors and to self-identify with how they would be impacted and how people they love are impacted because they know somebody. The stats alone says that every person knows somebody who's been sexually assaulted, somebody who has been battered by an intimate partner, and so really had to find a way to connect them. Today, that is not as much of a battle. It's not as much of a battle because of the level of education, the level of understanding of the impact of violent crime. That has changed over time. And so now they still ask the question, but it's so much easier and so much more engaging and so much more fruitful and thoughtful a conversation about what victim survivors are truly up against and an appreciation for their experiences and the compassion and the empathy that is critical to have. I think that that's where time and experience has taught me that it is water over stone. That's what it is. That you keep going, you keep the message constant, and you continue to be creative and willing to pivot in terms of how you support victim survivors. There have been challenges throughout the 39 years that I've done this work, and these challenges are significant. There is no question. The level of vitriol and the level of misinformation and how that impacts victims is incredibly significant. But victims have been facing that forever. And they face a very intimate and painful experience at the hands of people that they trust and love and know. And so I keep that close to me, and I know that while this is incredibly challenging right now, it is a moment in time, and all moments change. They always do. And so we hold true to who we are, what we do, and why we do it the way that we do it. For people who have never experienced violence in their lives, they have no idea what that takes. They have no idea what part of your soul and spirit that you have to reach into to move through it and to survive it. And it's not pretty. And it is complicated, and it is isolating. And so just to understand the level of strength and depth of character that it takes to move through that, I wish people really understood that. We work so hard to center victim survivors' voices and to ensure that everything that we do is based on what it is that they want and not what we think should happen because, golly, we have a lot of information, but we're not living their life. And they're adults and they get to decide. That's the bottom line. And so supporting that and ensuring that is really about the respect we have for victim survivors. I say this a lot. People ask me what we do, and they expect me to rattle off a list of services. And it's never been a list of services. It's always been about problem solving and meeting that victim survivor where they are. So services today and what we do may mean getting somebody diapers and getting them some food, or it could mean helping through a moment on a crisis line where they are struggling with keeping themselves alive, to helping somebody find a place to live, to sitting next to somebody and holding their hand while they're in court and they're having to listen to how they're being treated by a whole group of people that they don't know. It literally can be anything. It really can. And so that's why, when I talk about what we do, I say we're problem solvers. That we're problem solvers, but really we're a standing foundation. We're a place that somebody can lean as they're making their decisions about their life and how they move their life forward. I don't think that people realize how much of a compliment this is to our organization, but I think the thing that always stuns me is what people will ask of us. We get calls, can you do XYZ? And the reason it's such a compliment is because they're calling us because they know we probably can. And if we can't, we know how to get it and how to do it or how to find it, right? And that was something that it took me a kind of a while to figure out because I would get enmeshed in that anger or that frustration or that pain of how victim survivors get treated. And then there was this moment where I kind of went, oh, but wait a minute. There is a level of commitment and respect for the organization and who we are and who we help that started to really come through in the expectations or the hopes of the requests that were coming our way. And while it has sometimes been the bane of our existence, because I will tell you it's been challenging, and some of the requests we get, you just kind of go, well, okay. But it also tells me how enmeshed we are in the fabric of our community and how we're relied on. And that truly is an honor. I have been around long enough to know what it's like without services. And if I were to compare it to something that we're seeing right now in our communities, or that we're seeing right now in our society, is that as we see resources go away, you see people endure more harm, endure more pain, and in some cases more death, to be quite blunt. Nobody deserves to go through that kind of violence or that kind of criminal activity alone. They deserve support. And we know that when you take resources away, the level of isolation and the things that you don't get to hear in a community are profound. But family get to learn it. They learn about, how somebody they love was damaged. Children get to learn it. They experience that pain and they experience that trauma, and it changes how they grow up. And our communities get to experience it, but they don't always know what it is in their losses of families, in their losses of community, in their losses of how we move forward as a collective.
Thank you for listening, and thank you for believing that the work truly matters. If you have questions or need help, call one of our 24/7 free and confidential crisis hotlines, 1-800-373-1043 or 1-800-228-1625. Thank you to KRUI Radio 89.7 FM for providing us with the space to record this podcast.